So I'm Adrian Tyndall. I am Dean and Executive Vice President for Health Affairs, Morehouse School of Medicine. So my journey in medicine started when I was very young. Matter of fact, growing up in the DC area, I thought I wanted to be a musician, actually. Didn't think I wanted to do medicine necessarily, but I was always attracted to science. Science was a big part of my upbringing. I enjoyed it. My sister was interested in it, and I got into it in a very big way. But I'll tell you, all the way through high school, I grew up playing piano. I thought I wanted to be a musician. I thought maybe I'll like do the hip hop thing. I don't know. I was just into music and wanting to compose and all of that. And a matter of fact, when I went to college in DC. I grew up in the DC area. I minored actually in piano performance, thinking all along the way. But somewhere along the line, I had a grandmother who looked at me and told me I was not talented enough, and I probably needed to do something else with my life. And medicine became a reality for me. So I embraced medicine. Some of the first jobs I ever did actually was working in a hospital. And I worked at George Washington University Hospital. I was a patient transporter, then a nursing assistant in the emergency department, and got to see medicine up close. And that was a time where, um, there were two, I would say, sort of pandemics, you might imagine, during that time. And this is the 1980s in Washington, D.C., where gun violence was a whole high. I mean, DC was the murder capital of the world at that time. But at the same time, the HIV disease was spreading, and I saw on one side of the equation a lot of black men dying from gun violence, and then on the other side, I saw a lot of Caucasian white folks dying from HIV. I saw that in the emergency department too. It was the heyday for it. And learned a lot of lessons there. It was the first time ever doing CPR on a traumatized victim. I learned a lot hearing patient stories during the time I was transporting them to their rooms. Um, I got to really see the underbelly of our healthcare system in a way that I didn't expect necessarily to see. And as you might imagine, working in the emergency department space, I I became attuned to the notion that I wanted to do emergency medicine. I wanted to be in a space where I can help people who I think probably were at some of the lowest points, most afraid, most worried. Uh, but I also admired how people went around doing their work and doing their job. And I was attracted to medicine from that lens. So I left the Washington, D.C. area. I took about a year hiatus off where I was uh, talented enough to play jazz piano and make some money in the Washington, D.C. area. And then I went off to University of Maryland, where I studied medicine and stayed there for residency in emergency medicine. So that was the big deal for me. But I think from the very beginning, I saw something about the practice of medicine that drew me in. I saw this idea of helping folks when they clearly needed support the most, and I was in the position witnessing, you know, um, so much good, and the way that it happened, and the way that people gave of themselves. I became so attuned to. And it was one of those really important driving forces for me in medicine. Academic medicine came naturally because I like to teach, I like to mentor, and I wanted to also give back in other ways. And I too was mentored by outstanding people actually at the University of Maryland. And I think that the fact that there were some people, and I think of especially one person, the late Dr. Elizabeth So, who actually I think became my primary mentor in medical school. the fact that people can take an interest in you in this way was important, and I saw the benefits of mentorship, and I think that naturally tuned me into what it was to give of knowledge and to teach and to really expand other people's horizons. You know, typically students and other learners, and so that for me became something that I think was a natural, um, sort of a natural affinity for. So I left University of Maryland, and my first job in the New York area was with a safety net hospital, because that was my other driver. I, uh, you know, learned and really was someone who thought a lot about what emergency medicine was, and I found that a natural place to practice was in underserved communities. Um, and my first job in New York as a faculty member was at Brooklyn Hospital Center, whereas you may now recall was the epicenter of the COVID crisis in New York. I mean, you heard a lot about what was happening there, but my first job was there, and it was about providing care in areas that were underserved. And I thought that that was the calling that was really important to me. Along the journey, I learned a couple of things. Um, I learned that I did not know enough about the business of medicine. Uh, Medical school taught me to be an outstanding physician and clinician, and even a teacher and academician. But understanding the business of medicine was something very different, and coming close and personal to the safety net mission uh, drove me to go to Columbia and do my master's in public health and health services management. And there I learned about um, the healthcare system, the economics of the healthcare system, the underbelly of our financial infrastructure, the perverse payment models that we actually see today that I think drives a lot of what we see in healthcare disparities. I learned a lot, I think, from being there, but also being exposed to a system actively practicing in that kind of environment, I think was key. But along the way, I grew my armamentarium, so to speak. I became more skilled as a teacher and a clinician, as an educator. I did some research, as much as I can do in a safety net system in a hospital setting. Um, Focused a lot of my early work in asthma, and as you might imagine, that was an area of high impact, especially in the East New York area, right, where asthma rates were incredibly high. So I did a lot of my work in Brooklyn before being recruited away to the University of Florida. At the University of Florida, I spent I would say, my last 14 years of academic life before transitioning to Morehouse School of Medicine. University of Florida was a place where I got to build. I was asked to really build a department of emergency medicine that was in its infancy at the time. A small number of faculty members, really a residency program that just started, a research mission that really was non-existent. And I was asked to build a program, and that I did. The soil was fertile. There was a lot of need. I was attracted to the academic space because I love the teaching. I love the research mission. And so I grew that department to expand tremendously in terms of the number of faculty I was able to recruit, the research mission, which really grew and became federally funded. Not only grew the residency program, but added 7 fellowships in terms of emergency medicine fellowships on top of the primary residency program. And that was a really exciting, I think, time for me in terms of growth. Uh, but over that time, I learned even more about the business of medicine and academic medicine. It's a very important, and I think for me was very instructive to be in the middle of an integrated academic health center and understand how care delivery occurred in that setting. I was in the hospital system board for many years. I was asked to fill the interim dean seat that was vacated. So just before the pandemic, I became the interim dean of the School of Medicine. I was actually the first African American chair of an academic emergency, of an academic department at the University of Florida. So that was the first. I think I was probably the second African American chair of an emergency medicine department at a university system in the country at the time. And then when I became interim dean, I was the first African American person to sit in the dean seat at the University of Florida. That was before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and every institution went through some sort of crisis. So did we at University of Florida. At the time, I was also chair of the board of the Proton Therapy Institute, which was, one of the major missions in oncology at the University of Florida system. And so both entities, as you might imagine, in the healthcare space went through some financial crisis. So we're able to weather and navigate through the financial crisis and get to the other side after the first wave of the pandemic. And at that point in time, there was a pivot in terms of what did I really want to do, and what mission really truly aligned with what I was attempting to do. I think over time amassed experience and a level of capability, and I thought to myself that I really wanted to ensure that my internal mission aligned with the external mission of whatever entity that I was actually looking at. So there were a point in time where other institutions were calling to ask me to interview for dean positions. One of them was Morehouse School of Medicine. And so I was asked to interview and compete for the position for Morehouse School of Medicine's dean position. Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice, who was then the president and dean at the same time, had chosen with the board to separate the positions again. And so she was going to have the sole role of president and CEO, and they were looking for dean and executive vice president, which was her role when she first started 12 years ago. And I got invited to campus and had my series of interviews, sat with a group of maybe a dozen students who were there to interview me, and we began exchange stories as we introduced ourselves, and they told me about their why they were at Morehouse School of Medicine, what Morehouse School of Medicine had done in terms of believing in them and giving them this chance to pursue their mission, to pursue their dream. And I remember very distinctly as we went around the room, by the end, there wasn't a dry eye left in the room, right? People were very emotional about the impact that Morehouse was having in their lives. And I, in turn, looked at this and said to myself, what am I doing? I mean, I'm in a premier opportunity not only to give back, but to make impact for students who may otherwise have not had the opportunity. I felt I was lucky. I was given an opportunity to be part of a medical school class at the University of Maryland. It was a challenge, but I was supported and I graduated. But I wanted to be able to provide that support for others, especially those who look like me. And being behind these amazing individuals, these students who I saw who were in front of me, and being the wind in their sails to get them to their career paths and to what they wanted to achieve was just for me an opportunity I could not turn down. And so I became dean at Morehouse School of Medicine. And the one story I will tell you is that when I arrived my first day of campus, Morehouse School of Medicine is a closed campus, so you have to go through security in order to get there. And I came through the security gates, and this security guard, the gentleman there, stopped me and asked me who I was, and I told him I'm a new employee. I'm the dean of Morehouse School of Medicine. And he looked at me and said, "Oh, you were that guy from Florida?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he looked down, did a few things, I suppose, and looked back up to me, and he said, "Welcome home." And from that moment, I recognized that at that moment I was in the place I was supposed to be. So I'm at Morehouse School of Medicine. I'm there as dean and executive vice president. I'm, you know, moving not just with the mission, but one could say moving with the movement. And that movement is to really advance health equity. That movement is to diversify the workforce. That movement is to give opportunity to students who may not otherwise have had that opportunity to excel, and excel they do. It's a mission to be able to not only produce the next generation of healthcare workers and providers and doctors and physician assistants, but researchers and public health workers, and hopefully sometime soon nurses, right? As we think about our role in really impacting the healthcare system, and for that matter, the fabric of the community. I mean, I think it's such an important role. And when your inner passions and your inner mission aligns with that of the institution, um, there are no regrets. It's the best place to be.
So you spoke about it, so I'm going to use your language. The movement of Morehouse School of Medicine. What are you most proud of that you all have done and are doing within the movement of Morehouse?
Well, I'll tell you, I've been to Morehouse for 2 years, and looking back at the history of Morehouse School of Medicine, when Hugh Gloucester and Lou Sullivan talked about the need to improve and to impact the healthcare workforce in the state of Georgia. When you look back at the data then in terms of just the number of African American physicians in the workforce, and you look at what is happening today, you know, one will look at the statistics and will say that we've not overall across the country moved the needle much in terms of especially African American male matriculants to medical school. But what Morehouse School of Medicine has done in Georgia is substantially impact the number of physicians who not just graduate from institutions like Morehouse School of Medicine and other institutions, but graduates who end up staying in the state of Georgia and making an impact. The significant part of Morehouse's mission was to contribute to the primary care mission, for sure. And so one of the charter goals for Morehouse School of Medicine is to ensure that students who graduate, a certain percentage of them actually not only remain in the state of Georgia, but also remain focused in primary care. And we've been able to achieve that year after year. Um, so that I think has been one of the most outstanding contributions that we've actually made. But I think the other contribution, which is really important, is the fact that, you know, when we look across the spectrum of students and the potential for students to become outstanding physicians, Morehouse School of Medicine in many ways provided that opportunity for students who otherwise may not have had that opportunity anywhere else. And we've proven against maybe the conventional wisdom then that what it takes to become an outstanding doctor aren't necessarily the metrics by which we would measure students in general. And at Morehouse School of Medicine, there's no question that the culture that was created over time of supporting students really resulted in a yield in terms of success. So I think that culture is something that's important. It's what we want to hold on to as we embrace this brand new world of expanding our class size and doing all these great things. The question becomes, how do you hold on to that secret sauce that was so important in generating the success that we've actually seen in Morehouse School of Medicine year after year, in producing physicians who not just populate the state of Georgia, but whom, like I'm here at the NMA, you know, our students, our physicians, our products are everywhere, right? And it's gratifying to see the impact the Morehouse School of Medicine made not just in the state of Georgia, but in the state of Louisiana, right? I mean, it's wonderful to see.
So, last question. So you spoke about your why and the other students representing their why. But as someone watching, thinking of, where should I go for medical school? What would you tell them for their why. Why Morehouse School of Medicine?
I'll tell you why. When we think about the social mission of Morehouse School of Medicine, and that social mission really has several parts to it. It's really about recognizing what counts and what matters when we're providing care to communities. It's really about how we approach medical education and how we approach how we educate students about what matters and how we impact care in the community. This whole idea of diversifying the workforce and leading the creation and advancement of health equity, and I'll add now in pursuit of health justice, is something that we have embraced wholeheartedly. It's part of our DNA. I think, and I've heard this over and over again, the students who come to Morehouse School of Medicine are not just here to get a basic medical education. They're here to understand all those important nuances that become important as we give back to the societies that we actually care about, the communities we actually care about. And that alignment becomes important. I think that's one issue. I think the second issue, which is important for students to understand, is that we have a different culture in medical education. It's not one that's competitive. It is one where we embrace learning communities, where we ensure that we learn together as a village, as a community, where our faculty partner with our students to ensure that they get the best education possible, where students who come to Morehouse School of Medicine feel protected in that process of educating themselves. I think we're very proud of that tradition. And I think that students who look at Morehouse School of Medicine and who eventually matriculate will understand that their personal missions align with the missions of the institution. Because of their lived experiences, they understand that their personal missions absolutely align with what Hugh Gloucester and Lou Sullivan thought about all the way back then in the 1970s when Morehouse School of Medicine was conceived, right? How do we best impact our communities, especially those underrepresented in those communities of color, right? And I don't think that there's any other entity on this planet, frankly speaking, that does it better than Morehouse School of Medicine when we specifically think about how we want to impact our communities. And I think that's really important for folks to understand. It is indeed a special place, but it's a place that's growing. And this secret sauce that we talk about, how we impact healthcare in our community in Atlanta, in the state of Georgia, we're actually taking across the country as we build regional campuses with common spirit, and as we find ways of engaging with those communities with the same formula and the same infrastructure, developing the pathway programs that will eventually allow those communities to find in their presence, hopefully in the future, providers and clinicians who represent and who look like those communities. And I think that Morehouse School of Medicine will be very instrumental in spreading that brand and spreading that knowledge and that know-how and making that impact similarly to the impact we've made in the state of Georgia.
Well, you heard it here first. Morehouse School of Medicine making an impact around the globe. Around the globe. So we're honored to have you here and honored just to have your products, what you've been able to churn out in so many different areas. The students, the doctors that are impacting their communities. And we love it. We love the Morehouse School of Medicine. So keep up the great work. Keep up the great work. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've seen it here first at the National Medical Association 2023 conference. The Dean of the Medical School, Morehouse School of Medicine, Dr. Tyndall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.